Welcome to X-Men 97, Episode 1 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast. I'm Rod. We're finally fucking saying it.
We're here. We've finally got here.
We made it.
I was legitimately worried like 3 weeks ago because you were saying, well, what if it gets delayed again? And I was like, please don't be right, Rod. Please do not be right.
I didn't have any insight into that. I was just like joking, but also Hollywood.
Yeah. And I'm JC, and we have pins now, by the way. We posted them on our social media. I got them just in time for the debut of this show and forgot to bring any to GDC with me. Oh. So great job, John. But I will have them with me at WonderCon. And if you see Rod or I at any conventions and you are a fan of the show, let us know, and we will have pins. We're not like charging for them. I guess if somebody needs it shipped to them, maybe we just charge for that, but we're not doing it as a for-profit thing. So
yeah. Or if you just want to contribute.
If you want to donate, like, I don't know, fucking donate to Rod's Patreon. That's the only donation thing we have set up.
I might be to a couple of cons with John, but he's definitely more of the con guy. For me, if like you catch me at like the Grove, maybe I'll try to throw them in my bag.
Or the Americana.
Yeah. Wherever. You never know where I'll end up. I end up in random spots around LA all the time.
It's true. Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series. We are going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode that we can find. This podcast started with the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series, building up to this very moment, the release of X-Men 97. And just for this week, we have 2 episodes. And episode 2, saying this in the future, should be coming out tomorrow. And our podcast
depends on how long we talk.
That's true.
If we talk for a while, it might take me 2 weeks to edit this. We'll see.
Yeah. Our podcast feed may feel a little out of order as we're taking a break from the X-Men Evolution episodes during these for the release of X-Men 97. So we can recap these again in real time as best as we can. But not the same day, because fuck that.
Some quick reminders. We're a recap show about an episode that aired less than a week ago. I love these. There will be spoilers.
I made the change, but I still had a typo.
I didn't even catch it. If you don't want to spoil for you, pause the podcast and watch the episode and come back. Heavily recommend watching the episode. If you haven't seen, as of right now, Rotten Tomatoes has a 100% critic score and a 94% audience score, which tracks to me.
Yeah.
Because it's just great. Like, I think as long as you like superhero stuff, even if you didn't see the X-Men original show, if you get the premise of what the start of it with Xavier being gone is, other than that, it's just a solid show on its own. I told a friend, like, I think it might even been higher audience score if it wasn't like with the expectation of 92, just because, like, you know, there's no matter how good they do, there'll be some attachment to like that original thing that we saw, but they did a pretty good. We'll get into it. So We're currently not sponsored or affiliated with Marvel Animation, Disney, or Disney Plus in any way. But now that we've seen the show, like, I'll be open to it. I'm not going to shit talk the show just yet.
Yeah, but I will say, fingers crossed, we do have a line of communication out to Disney, hoping to get some of the voice actors booked. I don't want to say any names in case it doesn't go through, but that is a big goal for us. Please don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast service.
Now onto the show. Today we're going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 1, titled To Me, My X-Men. We've been waiting to hear that phrase for a long time.
Yeah.
And we heard it several times from several different characters.
We did.
It aired March 20th, which as of recording was yesterday, 2024. And it currently sits at an 8.5 star rating on IMDb. I would not be surprised if that gets higher as more people start watching it through the weekend. I don't know about you. I'm aware of several watch parties happening this weekend, because the one criticism I'll have for Disney is they did not decide to air these or post these Saturday mornings, which would have been the extra little, like, you know, nice nostalgic thing.
Yes, I agree. That would have made our lives harder, though.
Oh, yeah.
Would have had to base our weekends for the next 8 weeks off of that.
But only because, like, I know you can wait, but who's going to wait?
Well, we especially can't wait, aside from the show, but we've ruined our algorithms on every social media service because anything X-Men just surfaces to the front of my feed. And for transparency, I flew into GDC in San Francisco, and I was originally going to try to watch it the first day, but like at 8 o'clock at night, I thankfully just went off my instinct and I downloaded them, watched them on the flight from LA to San Francisco. And thank God I did, man, because just out of instinct, opening up Instagram, 3 spoilers would have hit for me had I not actually watched it already.
Yeah, so we'll put it out there too. If somehow you've dodged spoilers now and you haven't seen the episodes, just pause us right now and go watch it, because it's really easy to catch spoilers. They're everywhere. This is almost on that end game level. Spoilers, not like the weight of the spoilers, but like how much is out there.
The quantity that is out there, absolutely.
Even just people, I don't know if people are just like malicious or dumb or a little of both, but you probably saw in the Facebook group that people are asking like leading questions that are spoilers. They think they're being coy. They're like, hey, so I won't even say because it's going to spoil now, but like, they're like, is blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you just gave the main plot point of the second episode in your question.
Right. But what's interesting about that one is I do know at least one of the Facebook groups have a post approval on right now. So that meant the admins in the group felt it wasn't spoiler enough. So they're actually rejecting certain posts in at least one of those groups.
I don't know how.
But there's also, by the way, 2 X-Men the Animated Series groups. The only reason I could tell them apart is the image identifier on it in Facebook. But it's literally same capitalization and everything.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm still the other one, because I can't figure out how they, like, I feel like some posts go through right away and then other ones need to be approved or something. I don't know.
There's the bigger group, which has moderation, which is like 200,000 people. That's the one of the graduation day shot of like all the headshots next to each other.
Yeah.
The smaller one, which has started popping in my feed, which is like 30,000 members, I want to say, and is a public group. It's not private, so it could just organically hit your feed. That one has no approvals, and it's that classic, like that cover image that has like Wolverine. I think it was the cover image of the first DVD.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was used everywhere because we didn't have any other images besides screenshots.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get into it.
The show starts, that Marvel animation logo comes up. I didn't know what to make of it because the beginning of the music that you hear is so like ominous, and it wasn't the theme yet. But I will say, I've said this to all my friends, I'm a little biased. Personally, I feel like this version of the theme doesn't hit as hard as Ron's, and I would have loved to see Ron be part of this one.
Right.
They didn't do a bad job by any means. I'm not trying to bash the Newton brothers or anything. I did really like how they put all the electronics and the orchestration at the beginning of this song. It gave this like cinematic quality to it, and then it launched into that sequence. I think I almost cried. Like it was so good. Like, I
mean, it was, for the vast majority of it, it was a shot for shot like homage and remake.
Yeah,
there were a few things that got removed from it. But, and we'll actually talk about this in every episode, because I think they're going to do this in each episode. We've seen it on episode 1 and episode 2. They change certain shots depending on what is going to happen in that episode. And I think that's why some of the shots that were chosen, like Beast jumping on the pile of rubble, Storm in the danger room, Scott in the danger room, the improved shot of Rogue doing the slam on the Sentinel by grabbing its cables, like all of that was very thoughtful. We got rid of Jubilee running towards the fence. That one was not there. And what's it called? There was the shot of Wolverine where he sprayed his claws and there was like the electricity between them. That was removed as well.
Which is funny because we'll get into this a little bit. They added that ability to him in this version of the series. Yeah. And I mentioned this to you on text. I'm a little bit sad they got rid of Green Guy. I kind of would have loved them to like write him in. But Lady Deathstrike, that was fun. A little random without context, but I guess we will see. I'm not even sure, and we'll get into this in the second episode, how much it has to do with that specific episode, because some of the things were like, it was cool to see, but like they were just like new things. So it's interesting that they're like, they really found, in my opinion, they hit this balance of like getting the energy and the spirit of the original and having enough updates that it wasn't old. Right.
We had Morph with an intro card, which they've never had ever before. Bishop had an intro card insinuating that they're full members of the team, and Xavier still had one in this episode. So I thought that was all thoughtful. And then at the end, which I thought at first was only going to be for the first episode, but I did double checks on it and it actually appears in both. There is a shot of Morph with Sinister as this ominous figure and stuff like that. So that one was in both, and there really wasn't anything about Sinister in either of these 2 episodes. So
yeah, I think it's more of like the intertwining of Morph and Sinister, because Sinister has so much to do with like Morph's trauma, and both Morph's and Bishop's logos, once again, they just caught the vibe perfectly, because even though we've never seen those logos, they fit perfectly. Yeah. And they're not stock fonts. Like they were new, they were different than the other characters, and they just fit.
One random factoid I did see online, and I don't remember where who posted it, so I can't give them credit for it, unfortunately. Scott is the only one who is in actual civilian clothes, other than arguably Jubilee, in their intro shot.
Yeah, that's
everybody else is in a uniform except for Scott doing the whole like drops to his knees and shoots the optic blast into the sky. He's wearing an outfit that I don't know. I think he only wore when he like was picking up Rogue and Storm at the mall in the first episode.
I feel like next time we run into Larry Houston, that's a question to ask, because it's either extremely meaningful, like something like the action of the jacket or something.
Should we write these down like as a thing? I'm gonna start a Ask the Leewolds note in my phone, and then we'll forget we have it. Ask the X crew.
Or Larry's gonna be like, I never even thought about it. It's just what happened, because you just never know. But yeah,
he's gonna be like, wow, you guys are fucking nerds,
right? It's kind of like that. What was that Family Guy episode where they go to the Star Trek convention and all the actors of Star Trek were like, we don't fucking know or care, like,
which was a play off of a Simpsons episode because they were doing that with the Itchy and Scratchy voice actors.
Yeah, with Comic Book Guy. Yeah, and so I don't know what I was expecting, because with all the stuff I was mentioning before, with all the insight into the show before, I never once had any preview of like what was happening with this intro, and I literally had not even thought about what the intro was going to be. I don't know why, but this was perfect. Like, super strong start. Like, a new intro probably would have been forgivable, but wouldn't have like hit the feels like it did. Right. My personal TikTok algorithm right now is like 80% people reacting to seeing that for the first time, and almost everybody's crying in it, like grown men and grown women crying.
So not this episode, but second episode, I definitely got choked up. One last thing from the intro that is worth mentioning. So aside from the removal of Gargoyle, who that is the character's name, we actually found this out through yeah. So originally in the Leewolds book, previously on the making of an animated series, that character was not acknowledged, and then when they did the updated book, Larry Houston did correct that it was Gargoyle, who's traditionally an Iron Man villain.
Oh, interesting.
But aside from the little green guy, they did swap out Thunderbird. Thunderbird was swapped in for White Queen.
Yeah, Emma Frost. I guess they just maybe not planning on. I don't know. I guess that's probably stuff that's gonna be answered throughout the season, I guess.
Well, we know at the very least from Comic-Con 2 cons ago that the Hellfire Club is a villain, or is featured in the episodes. So, I think in that original one, they were just like, oh, Thunderbird, maybe there's a thing that we end up doing with him. They never end up doing it, so why keep them in the intro if, at the very least, Avalanche and Pyro we've seen,
Yeah. So, perfect intro. And then it opens up in New York, like a city skyline.
With the Twin Towers there, man.
Right. Like, so I heard a few commentaries saying that whatever, I don't know if it was like geographically or design-wise, they weren't exactly, but it was supposed to give that outline because it was the 90s.
I feel like I've seen that in lots of animation stuff where there's certain buildings that are visible that from the angle shown, you could not see all of those buildings. So I think that's just like an art trope. That said, there's literally a shot in Times Square, which is the next thing you see, and it actually says "Eat Coffee."
Okay.
And the only reason I that even popped up to me, I took a picture of it to send to our buddies Danny from Ismahawk, the like high-end VFX YouTube storytellers.
The filmmakers that worked with Atomic Mari, right?
Yeah.
Short film. Yep.
And it's because there's a logo on the screen that looks a little bit like the Ismahawk logo, even though it's obviously not. Mm-hmm. And then he didn't even notice that. He went right to the "Eat Coffee." That's a weird thing to send me.
That's funny. Yeah, and also in this opening with the little opening credit text, everything about this is right. Like the grain that's over the entire show, the text even looks a little offset.
Yep.
The original show was not on purpose, but this one they obviously did on purpose. And they keep zooming into the city, so we get the seedy back alleys and stuff. And
right.
It was in the trailer where we had all those Easter eggs with the newspaper, but they changed the headline in the newspaper. It was but something about I can't remember what it was. They changed a really vague term from the top to something specific, and it didn't matter for the story, but it was a small change.
There was also in one of the shots there was Rising Spire Records, something
Tower
along
Records.
Well, I was like, is Rising Spire also a play off of the Phalanx episode? Because those were literally spires that were popping up. I did like that there was a Futurecom store, and they were
pagers?
featuring pagers and more, and more was spelled MOER.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Dude, I was sitting in the airport taking notes on this, so I was doing lots of like pauses and stops when I was watching through my second time.
Yeah.
And like some of the stuff was just like, it had to be intentional, but it's just like so wacky and random. So
Yeah, like it's like somebody's last name or something.
and then I saw like, because I read it quick as Rising Spire, somebody read that as Spiral, and they were saying that was a reference to Spiral from Mojo, which also could work, but I didn't go back and do a triple check because we had to start recording the show at some point.
I feel like the Tower Records reference is like a lot closer because that's a New York thing. Like I actually missed that place because when I lived on the East Coast and we would go visit New York, that was like one of my first stops because that's back in the day when they, especially in the mid 90s when they had the listening stations. Every record store had that, but Tower Records especially had more than anybody else. You could listen to almost everything that was current in there.
And then we see Callisto and Leech, who were next to the store called Crazy Eddie's, which I've always heard about that being a thing, but I'd never actually seen a Crazy Eddie's or Crazy whatever's in my life. But that was like apparently a trope that was real for lots of other people.
Yeah,
so
I think there was only one, right, in New York.
But there was always like crazy, there was like, you know, crazy whoever's car sales, crazy whatever furniture store. Like I had Bob's. Bob's wasn't crazy.
Like
Bob's was very
discount.
boring. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Crazy Eddie's is like a actual reference to like out of business New York place. Only because I like I said, I had lived on the East Coast for a while. I feel like I had enough East Coast friends like point that out on social media. Like, oh, they put Crazy Eddie's in this. But over the top of all this footage, you hear a voiceover of a news report talking about Professor X's assassination. I guess that's how they're framing this because we know from seeing Graduation Day that he physically went with Lilandra to the Shi'ar. Right. But we also don't know exactly what happened because they made it clear that it was last year, and it sounds like not a full year, like maybe a few months.
Yeah, the way the time has been mentioned, I feel like it's like 9 months or so, roughly. Yeah.
It was I think it was Storm. If it wasn't Storm, it was Gene had made like a side passing like it's been a few months or whatever. But it was
Rogue who says it's been a crazy few months.
Okay, and then then the news every time someone official talks about it, they say last year. And so I guess we're just supposed to.
Well, I think it's last year in terms of calendar year because we do get that reveal a little later on that it supposedly happened on November 11th of 96.
Yeah, and so then that also kind of
which is not with the real time of when that episode aired was.
Yeah, so that retroactively like confirms or clarifies timing for us. So like the original episodes weren't in actual real time, just like approximate real time.
Right.
Because that would have been like 96 for them and not 97.
Right.
But yeah, so that's how they're framing it. But it's interesting that Professor Xavier's martyrdom is actually what like won over public sympathy for
some of the public. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they made it sound like a good majority to the point where like the government wasn't like cracking down on them. Most people like think that weren't Morlocks could like freely roam. Stuff like the X-Men are very public figures. Like they're wandering in and out of places. Everyone besides Morph can kind of just wander in and out wherever without problems, you know. And by now they had 4 or 5 years of just gallivanting around town in spandex.
Yeah.
So everybody knows them.
Storm hasn't dropped a building on people in at least a year.
Right. And yeah, that's what's so funny. We'll get into this next episode. They keep talking about Magneto's like crimes and stuff. No one addresses Storm or Cyclops or any of that stuff, but is whatever.
We'll get into it.
So then we catch up with who I only recognize because of like evolution stuff. This was Sunspot going through. I don't know if this has always been his character, but he's like a rich kid that's being kidnapped.
So I figured you were going to ask me about this. I have not read a ton of original Sunspot stuff. The stuff I've read with Sunspot has been most recent, and it started when he was in New Avengers. He was actually like, I think he was owning like both, like he was an owner of part of AIM and stuff like that. There's a whole thing with him, but he was loaded at that point. There was I never dug deeper to figure out where it had come from, but money in him is in character. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, because the way he was talking, he just kept saying like, you know, we'll pay anything. Money's not an object. But then when I rewatched it again today, because his last name's DaCosta, right? So
yes.
I caught that in the background of one of the New York shots. There was like a DaCosta Properties or something.
Oh, was there? So, I didn't see that one.
So, like, I think it was like little in-universe things to say that they were like, you know, some sort of like wealthy family, like the DuPonts of Delaware or something.
Yeah.
Like own a lot of whatever the industry is, and Sunspot's being kidnapped by Friends of Humanity, which Love that representation right there, right away. Like,
that's who had taken over the hip skate party.
Yeah, right. That's once again another '90s thing.
And they're leading him through there, and I do love how like they're literally just like putting weapons or taking weapons out of rollerblade boxes.
That's another '90s thing. Also, I was thinking about this day. Like, I don't know why rollerblades were like a '90s thing and not just a forever thing. Like, roller skates are still a thing. Like, roller
skates have come back, but rollerblades did not.
It's so weird because there's not that much of a difference. Like, it's weird. I don't know.
I don't feel comfortable on a roller skate. I used to feel comfortable on rollerblades, so I have no idea.
Yeah. I always rented roller skates from skating rinks and stuff, but I actually own blades.
No.
So, I got them for my birthday. Anyway, my note here is Friends of Humanity have Mega Man blasters now.
Yes.
I don't know how to describe them.
No, that is perfect. I mean, literally, even the charging thing on the side of it, looked like it's the Mega Buster, but yes, everything else you said is spot on. Yes.
And they reveal that they're derived from Sentinel technology.
Yep.
And also that they're kidnapping Sunspot because they're getting 10 grand per mutant
from a person who's using them as target practice specifically.
Yeah, which is, I guess that they're hinting that Sinister, maybe.
I have no idea who.
Yeah,
I feel like it could go in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I also feel like if it's Sinister, then it's going to be for experimentation perspective. I don't think he's actually shooting them. Yeah,
well, I figured that was like a cover story or whatever. Because like manipulating, like if there's going to be bigots in the world, you might as well like shape them into your...
manipulate the idiots. Yeah,
and once again, like to go into the Friends of Humanity being idiots. When you have like this rich kid who's like, money's not an object, and you're like, I'm going to get 10K for this kid, and he's like, whatever you want, they could ask for more than 10K.
And then still kill him.
Or whatever. Or just whatever. He's just some kid. I know that they have hatred towards him, but like everyone has a price, right? Especially guys like that.
Those guys definitely have prices.
Right. But they just didn't think of it.
Yep.
He had this line that echoed back to something Jubilee said when she got captured by Friends of Humanity, that he said he basically said he didn't come out, and he was just born this way.
Yeah, he goes, I'm not like the ones on TV. I'm one of the good ones. I didn't even ask for this. I was born this way.
Yeah, and so there's a lot, we're going to see there's a lot of echoing back to 92, especially with like Jubilee, because Sunspot, I thought for a little while he was going to be our next like Jubilee Kitty Pryde. He was like half that.
I think he's going to be half that. I think he's going to be in and out of episodes, but I don't think he's going to be in every one of them.
Yeah, especially if we're not going to relate to like a billionaire kids.
Yeah. We see the guy who's effectively the head of this Friends of Humanity crew, and he has like scars across his face. Very specifically, it's 3.
I was going to say that has to be a Wolverine thing.
It does, or it could be like it could be a red herring, because they're not as clean as if it looks like Wolverine slashes would be. Like they were like at a little bit of an angle. So like I was like, oh, is that a saber-tooth claw kind of scenario?
I have a couple of red herrings that I have theories about.
Yeah. But they also mentioned that Sunspot didn't even use his powers. They don't know what he even does, but they just put the tracker on him, or the collar on him from Genosha anyway. So
which seems very dangerous. Once again, these guys are idiots. Even if you don't know what he does, and you have faith in these collars, like that's wild. I would not trust that.
I mean, the collars have shut down some of the strongest mutants, so I guess like just hope that you don't have a bum collar,
Yeah, bum collar. Or what if he just has like mutated abilities that would change that? Like I don't know. Like we were discussing before, like what are some powers of people? Like technically, Wolverine's claws aren't powers, right? Like and stuff like what if like he was just really strong or really smart or something? Like I don't know. There's so many things.
Imagine if his mutant power was really smart, and then they put the collar on him, and he just becomes a fucking idiot.
Okay, if any boys writers rooms you need to make that a power of somebody. When they get depowered, they just become dumb because their power was like
just super being smart. Yeah. Not even super intelligence, just above average intelligence.
Okay. Remember we talked about dumb powers that I would have in the real world?
Yes.
Mine would be like modest intelligence. It's like, what is your power? So you were technically born an idiot, but when your power manifested, you're like tolerable.
Like for some reason, you started going from being a D student to a B- student in high school, and we thought it was just you applying yourself.
Right. We're gonna find that out for a lot of people, I guess.
That's awful. Yeah.
I thought we were getting an Iceman intro because you could see everyone's breath, but then we hear that voice. I was so happy that this was the first entrance of like a mutant. It was my girl Storm. I have a continuation of this idea in the next episode, but right now they didn't fuck up Storm. She has the most badass entrance. I like how didn't shy away from the big monologue Storm that was
Mistress of the Elements shit. Yeah.
she gave you all the exposition. So once again, if you never saw the show before, you're like, oh, that's what she does. That's who she is. But it also kind of gave a little bit of context, because later on when Bishop is like, do you always have to do that? She's like, I just want to give him a fair shake. It's like, that's an interesting thing, even if it's kind of as a joke. It's like, well, I want to give him like a 1% chance to like stand down. That's why we do this big intro. But everything about that animation, like the busting in and the...
Also continued our favorite trope from 92, which did not go over into Evolution. Fuck your skylights.
I didn't think about that. Yeah. No, they immediately destroyed the skylight. So the writers and the animators, they knew. And then Bishop just kind of jumps in, and he was just like, oh shit, he's here. No explanation. We are gonna obviously address that later, because this show is too well written to not. And I like how I don't forget what his real name is, but he becomes Executioner.
I don't think they've said his name.
Okay, well,
so I don't think you've missed it. I think it's available online, but I haven't actually seen it said in the show.
He says, we got to move because X-Men are like roaches. Where there's one, there's going to be like a lot more soon, and like just as he says that, this podcast namesake busts in.
Before we get into that, I do love the new animation of Bishop's powers.
Oh, the
purple energy that goes through his muscle outline and stuff like that. Like, I think that's a consistent thing, and I'm not going to dwell on it for everybody just for the sake of saying it. But the showcasing of the powers from an animation perspective looks so much better than what we had from the 92 series. Even the best episodes of 92, this looked better to me.
Yeah, you could tell it wasn't just like crossfades.
It wasn't just like, a bright outline of stuff. Like there was thought into making sure every power looked differently. But yeah, back to our boy Cyclops.
And my note here is like, holy shit, did they make Cyclops cool now? So
that is what is going on online right now, is people literally being like, I love this version of Cyclops.
That was probably the biggest surprise to me. Was I didn't expect to like him this much, because he literally comes in Kool-Aid Manning through the door, but he's got everything put together, and that optic blast is had I seen this version of Cyclops before 92's version, I wouldn't have made the mistake that a lot of people do, that you had to explain to me about the optic concussive blast.
The force, yeah.
That's what he does this whole time. He's like sliding around.
He's using it to push himself, and like it had a smoothness to it that almost felt like it was like Iceman in a way.
Yeah, and also just how proficient he was with all the stuff he was doing. It wasn't martial arts, but it felt like it had that discipline.
Right, there were certain things that like felt like a Bruce Lee choreo, where like he elbows a dude as he blasts another guy, and then he does the punch up and stuff like that. And also, for people who don't notice, there's blood in this show. It's subtle, but there is absolutely blood in this.
These action scenes, even though it's just this one right now, is like top tier. Through this little scuffle, we see that the Friend of Humanity have a full Sentinel arm that's just sitting there. That we're presuming that's like where the Mega Man Blaster's technology came from.
Right.
I guess we're going to find out about later, like where all this came from. But like, it's kind of giving that, was it Spider-Man Homecoming with the Vulture, like is
like the lab and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, he took the wreckage from like past Avengers fights and like made it into new technology, kind of like that energy.
The Chitauri stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the Friends of Humanity like knock off take Cyclops' visor. And we saw this in the trailer, but it's still really cool to see.
Not just took his visor, the arm shoots a bolt, like the leg bolos out, and it wraps him up. Yeah.
And once again, even outside of the action, I just like his personality. He was like, oh no, not my visor. And then he says the 90s catchphrase, like, not, like...
Yeah,
which he said in 92 as well.
Which is not just from 92, but it was also from the pilot. It was in the second part of Night of the Sentinels specifically.
Okay. But I don't know, not to diss the original voice actor, because it also has to do with the writing. He was just cool. Like, I want to be this guy's friend. He's only had like 2 lines of dialogue so far.
Right.
And then he opens his eyes, and then my note here was, Cyclops continues the tradition of blowing up abandoned buildings.
A whole building, everything is blown the fuck out.
Everyone should have died in there, right?
At the very least, like, there's a few like people who are definitely like in wheelchairs moving forward. Like that concussive blast to do that to the building. Yeah, we're lucky if they're not dead.
Because we saw beams come out all the windows.
Yes,
it's like, wow.
Every window.
And they didn't even like. I almost expected to see Bishop and Storm in slings in the next scene because they were there too.
Well, they were on a scaffolding knocked out, so they were fine. The scaffolding is what saved them.
And then they didn't even worry about explaining that because it just cut to the mansion.
Yep.
And Cyclops. Now this is a little bit of what we knew from Cyclops. Him yelling at Gambit. He's like, "You should have helped us." To Gambit's credit, he was like, "You had Storm. You were fine."
Let's also talk about the Gambit design there.
Yeah, this is a
like it was online. Yeah, like literally, he's F-Boy Gambit. But not in the same way that I described F-Boy Gambit from Evolution, who I hate. This is just like, oh, he's definitely nailing somebody,
right? Or everyone.
Yeah.
To be honest, I haven't seen the actual discourse about it, but I've seen a lot of responses to the discourse. Well, I saw one guy's video that everybody keeps stitching on TikTok. Like, what did they do to Gambit? They made him gay. I was like, well, just because he's wearing crop top doesn't mean that. But then, also look at fashion of the fucking 90s, and the most masculine straight dudes possible were wearing that shit. They were wearing shorts and fucking like crop tops back then. Yeah. Like that was then. If I had abs like that, I would also just make crop tops. I would show off whatever part of my body looked like that. One of my favorite responses, though, I saw a stitch. This guy was like, he's not, but even if he was, why are you surprised? And he pulls up the original Gambit that we knew from 92 in the comics and stuff. He's like, this man is bisexual lighting personified.
I saw that.
And also his power is to make things turn hot pink and explode. Like, none of this should be a surprise. I was like,
he literally was wearing a banana hammock in the first series.
Right. Yeah. But he's in the kitchen cooking, and Jean doesn't yell at him.
He's specifically cooking beignets.
Only complaint about that. No powdered sugar. Yeah, it's just fried dough, which is still could be good, but like, also, is that what they're eating for breakfast? Just beignets?
I don't know. They burned a lot of calories the night before.
Right. Then Rogue walks in.
She's very Southern with all of her shit she's saying, and she's wearing the same purple dress that she wore in the Night of the Sentinels pilot.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, when they were at the mall.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And Lenore, we said this before, sounds amazing. Like, everybody's pretty great, but she nailed it right off the bat.
Lenore's voice has changed over time, and I do think of the original cast who has resumed their previous roles, I think hers has changed the most. All that said, I think she does an amazing job, and I think it's still a perfect fit for the character, but I think we do have to acknowledge, like, in the 30 years since the original series aired, hers is the most different, but that's not a negative. So
I agree with that in the show, but, like, I don't know if this is a recording thing or a directing thing. I feel like the time that I heard her in person, like 5 feet away, say the lines, sounded more...
When you were at LA Comic-Con.
Yeah, sounded closer to 90... Almost actually sounded dead on to 92.
Yeah.
Than this show. So I don't know what happened. It like I said, maybe it was a direction thing. Maybe it was a recording thing.
She feels softer, if that's the best way to describe it.
Oh, yeah, I guess. I didn't thought about it. I knew it was like a little different, but like, I guess I had kind of just set myself up to expect everybody to be a little different because 30 years, like I don't sound like I did 30 years ago.
And honestly, like in this episode, I think there's one line in the next episode that felt a little bit different for Gambit, but dude, he was fantastic. I wouldn't, if you didn't tell me and I didn't do the research for the show that I've done, I wouldn't think that was a different voice actor for Gambit.
Yeah, he was pretty good. And actually, while we're talking about the voices, and this is my opinion, I feel like Allison Seeley Smith for Storm is probably the most consistent from the original show.
Like one-to-one level. I agree with you.
The cadence, the tone, everything is like exactly the same. The most difference is visually.
Yeah.
But
I'm excited to get that comic, which I believe comes out 2 days after this episode airs for us. So on week 3 of the show. I wonder if it's because there's something that happens that would be spoilery for the cartoon, and they didn't want the spoiler from the comic spread all over the internet beforehand.
We'll say it's that and not like gross mismanagement of different medias.
Disney is perfect, sir.
Yeah, give us more money and then we'll keep talking about how great you are.
Give us money.
Yeah, give us money.
Yeah.
Right now we're just giving you money. Yeah, but then Xavier walks in, which clearly that's Morph. I think it's a little dark, considering everybody's still grieving him. But that's Morph's kind of sense of humor. Then Morph gives their like signature cackle, and I wish they would have done it more in this episode and the next, because as it goes along that kind of doesn't happen as much. But that's the Morph I remember from 92 is like sitting from the TV cackling. And
yeah, that initial introduction of Morph where the laughter is such a distinctive cackle kind of scenario. Yeah. I totally agree with you on that. But I do love the Xavier speech is, essentially dreaming of the world where both mutant and human are safe from how much you have a disdain for fun. Like, it was such and that's part of the love of Cyclops at this, is still the whole, like, he's still slim, he's still got that little bit of Cyclops there.
Yeah. Also made me a little happy to see Morph seemingly has recovered as much as they can from the trauma that they were, because when we last left Morph, they were clearly just very broken, not like functioning in the group.
And Morph made their return in Graduation Day, but it obviously was not a big part because they were just kind of there for the goodbyes as opposed to having a featured spotlight in the episode.
Yeah, we didn't get to see like what
had changed since and stuff. Yeah. At that point, Gambit charges a beignet and throws it to Scott, and we see the reveal of how Jean's power looks in 97, which are these cool, like, it actually reminded me a little bit of how I've seen Invisible Woman stuff drawn in the past.
Yeah.
Like, she catches the exploding beignet and throws it out the window,
which was kind of surprising because, like, at first I thought, because Gambit can do different levels and stuff, I thought it was gonna be a playful poof, but then it just full on like grenades on the outside. And Jean's like, you could have hurt someone. Like, yeah, you could have literally killed someone. And it was just like played off like this happens all the time. And that should have been the first sign that something's fishy with Jean, other than being pregnant. That's another reveal. We see she's very pregnant.
Yes. It's hard to say it's a reveal because obviously we've seen the heck out of it in all the preview materials. But yes, Jean is very, very pregnant, like 8.5, 9 months pregnant. Yeah. So,
but this should have been also another like foreshadowing red flag that Jean did not yell at Gambit
for his cooking
in the kitchen. Yeah.
Jean points out, she's like, just a reminder to everybody, this is a school. And I think to myself, when is the last time this has actually been treated like a school? Because it hasn't in this show.
The new crew has definitely added all the common sense that we had questions about the last time. Because Jean's like, there's children here. Also, you're the teachers.
Yeah. And then we jump over and it's Beast's lab. I do not know the song that is playing, so don't even ask us which one it was, unless you happen to know, Rod.
Oh, it's in the credits. They actually used a lot of needle drop music in this. I think it's in the credits, but like at one point there's like an Ace of Base song or something. So it's interesting in this show to hear like actual music that could be heard in the real world,
right?
In there because they have licensing rights
and a budget.
You're right.
Yeah, and then you see the bookshelf, which had 2 super generic books. You had one that was just science. You had one that was DNA. You had Animal Farm, which was a throwback to season 1 of X-Men 92, because that's what Beast was reading when they were incarcerated. And then the one that Rod didn't see that I was thrilled to put. It's probably the only thing I'll post that's like a episode-y spoiler, but there's one that says Jay Leewald, and we know is Julia Leewald, who, even though she was not credited for as many episodes as she worked on, her and Eric were, leading the charge of the entirety of it. So I loved seeing that, especially knowing that she has says one of her favorite things is writing for Beast and the spirit of Beast. So that being on the spine of his bookshelf, like that was a cool moment when I spotted that one.
So now we need Julia to write a book called Science or DNA, take your choice. And it doesn't even have to be like a nonfiction book. Make it a novel. We don't know. We don't know what Beast is into. Unless that's a biography.
It was a separate book, Rod.
Yeah, maybe it was a biography because everything else was a title. We don't know. I love that this is now, I feel like a third time is now established. Every new mutant or every new person in like the X Mansion wakes up to Beast. So Jubilee clearly in 92. Minor spoiler for the Marvels. I guess
if you haven't seen it yet, I don't care. You're getting it spoiled for you.
Monica wakes up to Beast. I don't have the technology to screen cap this, and I'm sure 1,000 people already have. Beast hits the same pose.
It's already all over Facebook.
Yeah,
I've seen
his glasses, and the jacket looks pretty. I mean, granted, it's just like a white lab coat, but like it's like they shared notes to frame it. And now Sunspot's waking up to Beast. I love that if it just kind of accidentally happened, or is this a natural choice that every new mutant or superpowered person wakes up to one of the most visually startling people, but also is like the kindest and makes sense. I was talking to my brother about this. It makes sense because he's the science guy, right? He's probably the closest thing to a doctor they got in there, like medical
He's
doctor.
Literally a doctor. I mean, he's an eye doctor, but he's a doctor.
Yeah, I forgot he's an optometrist, eye doctor. But then, like, another thing, me and my brother, this show was so good that, like, he called me and we gushed about this for, like, an hour because this was something me and him shared back when we were kids. Like, I was 11 and he was 6 or something. And he was like, well, it makes sense because that's where he would be. It's like, yes, but if you remember Jubilee, didn't start in Beast's lab last time. She was in like the infirmary or the med bay, and then wandered down the hallways, and then ended up randomly in Beast's lab. So it wasn't because he was a medical person back then. It's just what every writer chooses to like how they introduce like the eyes of the show or whatever.
Yeah,
I was just interesting. And so Sunspot's just like, wait, what? But Jubilee's also there. I think we've said this just in person, but I haven't ever said it on the show. She's visually 25% more Asian. This was something me and my brother both kind of appreciated. Even though her voice actor is now an Asian American woman, like it doesn't come across in the voice. She sounds like me or my brother. Like we just grew up in the States, and so there's no like accent or anything. But visually, just like small things where she might even still be mixed. We don't know, but like at least she's not like super generic. Like Jubilation Lee makes a lot more sense now.
Right, because in the comics she was American, born Chinese. Like she was not born in China. The character was born in America to Chinese parents. So it's kind of. That was smart of them. Once again, adding more common sense to the show. The X-Men as a team, they're like, we should probably have Jubilee down there with the kid because she'll be able to talk to him.
She knows experience. She's around his age, maybe, or closest out of everybody there.
Yep.
Like,
did you notice her earrings actually say Jubilee on them?
That was interesting. Were they X's before?
I believe they were X's before, but the original designs from Jim Lee in the comics of that era, it actually said it on there. So
that's great. I also love the idea of someone walking around with earrings with their name.
Rod,
like hoops.
Our circle of friends, I can guarantee you there's at least one.
Yeah, well, our circle of friends.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like in the middle of the Midwest or something, or New York, I guess.
Yeah, New York. Yeah, I mean, New York, it's more likely. Midwest, not as much.
Yeah, so they're all talking to Sunspot, basically just trying to calm him down.
And Beast is playing with Bishop's bracelet, which that's led to a lot of discussion online. My theory on it is that is going to either be revealed in a later episode as to what's going on, because it used to be if you took the bracelet off, people would just pop back into the future, or it'll get addressed in the mini comic when that comes out. So
yeah, I also wonder, and I hope they don't do this, but I think there's a possibility that like there's some stuff that end up being pretty heavy in the next episode, and it's like, will this play into this or some other high stakes? They've made it clear. We'll talk about it when it gets to it. There's a lot of high stakes in this show.
Right.
Is time travel going to be one of the things that helps? I don't know. We'll see. But it was like this is the first time I'm going to use this correctly. Chekhov's gun. So like he brings it up kind of out of nowhere. I mean, he has it in his hand, but like
it just never gets addressed again.
It doesn't have to do with that specific conversation, but then they made sure to point it out to us.
Yeah, it's like just let somebody bend space and time.
Right. I also love that Sunspot's not fazed by that, but his mind's not blown by time travel. I get not being fazed by powers because you're a mutant yourself.
You have them, yeah.
Cyclops and Storm come in. They're like, well, your only lead to finding how the Friends of Humanity got a fucking sentinel arm, but also you need to stay here because you're a child and they want to kill you, and that's a problem because they're still out there. And Sunspot's just like, I want to leave. I'll give you however much money you want. He actually thought he was still being held hostage.
Right. He's like, well, I'll pay you for the save. And they're like, well, no, we just don't want you to leave. He's like, so you're kidnapping me? And it's like, no, we're not kidnapping you. You just can't leave.
I like how calm he is about it. Like this trope of wealthy kids just being used to being kidnapped for ransom. Right. Did you ever watch Schitt's Creek?
No, I did not.
So the character Alexis in there, I actually think you would like Schitt's Creek a lot because the characters are ridiculous, but like in your kind of humor. Alexis.
They're all awful people?
Only on the surface. They're like the reverse. Like, they're not awful. They're only awful because of their wealth. They become better people as they become, because the first episode they lose all their money. But anyway, Alexis in it, the ongoing joke with her, she always has a story that someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think that they left this up to the actress, like Annie Murphy, to ad lib what the circumstance was each time. It was like kind of like the Family Guy cutaway jokes. Like that reminds me of the time, and she says some crazy kidnapping story about like, getting kidnapped by like a Saudi prince or whatever, and then spending like 6 months like in a dungeon somewhere or whatever. She's really calm about it every time she talks about it. And this with Sunspot, this is very similar. He's like, yeah, okay, we'll just get this over with. I know how this goes. Way too calm for all this stuff. And I also love how Jubilee. So she says like, we're trying to help mutants. And then they cut over to Sunspot and they freeze frame on his jaw drop for like a full 3 seconds.
Well, she calls him an arrogant yuppie. And I do think this is one of those times where they actually use the phrasing wrong. Because it's yuppie has to do with both like a fashionable lifestyle, but also being well paid. So like a Nepo baby is not the same as a yuppie because they inherited shit. I don't believe Sunspot has worked a fucking day in his life yet.
Yeah, it doesn't give that energy. It is interesting that he's at both our eyes, but also there's some intrigue in finding out like what is his deal.
They're trying to get the 2024 Nepo babies to enjoy the show.
Yeah, but the freeze frame on Sunspot's face was so... We'll see a lot more of this. They purposely put in these like weird things that were errors in the original show or concessions in the original show. Like, he doesn't move. I think it just gradually zooms in on him and it just like freezes. And sometimes there's action sequences where it goes from like a regular however many frames they have it to like 2 frames a second or something.
It's always so interesting talking about the show with other people because that's something that you've picked up on, and we both in preparation we watched the episode regular, and then you watched it a second time, I'm assuming regular, but I do stop and pause to take notes. I totally didn't pick up on that at all. So it's always cool to see how other people consume stuff like this.
Yeah, this is one that's kind of funny enough to worth go back and watching just for the second of it, because there's it's like silence. It's like an awkward like
right. And then he was like, "Well, is there other stuff to do around here other than listen to this blue guy sing opera?" And then you immediately see the UN like hall destroyed with bodies laying on the ground too.
Right. It gets dark. It's also foreshadowing.
Not even too far foreshadowed.
Right. And it's OG Magneto. Yeah. And Sunspot is like, wow, video games, once again, way too calm for all this. He's been through all this stuff before or something worse. And Jubilee's like,
he's actually been kidnapped by multiple cartels and shit like that. Right. I feel like, and he just paid his way out of it.
Like I said, like it's like Alexis from Schitt's Creek. He's like, yeah, I know how this goes. Like, this has been happening since I was like 11. Right. This is not. You need therapy. And
then there was one piece of writing here that I didn't love, and I absolutely give credit to our friend Matt Robb for pointing this out. Magneto pops up. Jubilee is like, yeah, this is Xavier's ex-bestie. I don't remember bestie being a phrase that would have been said in the 90s.
Oh, that's true. Although Mandela effect stuff, man, I can't even... Someone, like, I saw something the other day that was, or a few weeks ago that was like, yeah, bucket list didn't exist until like the late 2000s. I'm like, no, wait, what? No.
So
we don't have to get into that.
According to vocabulary.com, it began appearing in dictionaries as a slang term somewhere after 2010.
That tracks, because just anecdotally, I don't remember saying that, at least commonly.
No, because this would have been 97 was high school for me. So
I remember
it didn't feel like something we would have said back then.
I remember saying BFFs, and that was kind of new to me too then, because I remember songs coming out around that time that had BFF in the title. Like,
right.
It's like, oh, best friend. Okay, yeah. But I don't remember saying bestie. It's a good catch by Matt. I didn't notice that.
There's another comment Matt had about the EDM music, and I was like, oh yeah, dude, there were fucking raves in 97, because I do remember that, because it was all those glow stick kids. That was fucking 97. I do remember that stuff.
If you're in a club in New York or LA, I'll give it that they were probably 5 or 10 years ahead of the rest of the music scene.
Oh, yeah. I mean, shit. I forgot the name of the club, but it used to be the one that, like, kids from Long Island and Jersey would go into Manhattan. It didn't even start until 2 a.m, and it was, like, Jonathan Peters and, like, that entire, like, run of DJs and stuff like that. Yeah. There was an MTV True Life about those Bridge and Tunnel Kids.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that was literally the name, was the Bridge and Tunnel Kids. So
we were real creative back then.
Yeah.
But then I thought that this was going to be what kind of broke Sunspot. Like,
oh, sorry. I do have to say there was another great Easter egg that happened right there. She is trying to get Sunspot to use his powers and like questioning like, what can you do? And she goes, oh, what do you do? Like make gold balls pop out of your body? That would be weird. That is a reference to an X-Men.
Oh, so I saw someone online comment about this. This is one of the Krakoa things, right? It has to do with resurrection.
So the character came out within the last decade, pre-Krakoa, but there's the group called the Five, which are how the resurrection protocols take place. And the spot where the body essentially incubates as it's being grown faster by Proteus is in the gold balls or eggs. But yeah, there was a character named Gold Balls who would get made fun of constantly, who has become Egg because that's way less insulting.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, and so the Danger Room Magneto like flips over like a beam or something, like with large pieces of the building. I thought that was going to be the thing that scared Sunspot.
Right.
It jolts him enough that he moves, but he doesn't use his powers. He's still kind of like insecure about that. And then Wolverine hops out and like pins him down with the 2 side claws.
Yes.
tells him to respect Jubilee or respect the lady, and he still thinks this is the Danger Room. I don't know why. I just assumed that was a real Wolverine.
I did too, because it seems like something Wolverine would do. Like in a simulation Wolverine would attack Magneto.
Right. And also, not for any one specific thing, but I feel like as a whole average score, I feel like Cal Dodd and Wolverine is the overall most consistent from the 92. Each of the individual components I could see like being further or closer, but I think like between voice, animation, attitude, everything, like it was
like totality. Yeah.
Yeah. Like even from the beginning intro stuff, I was like, wow, I have to like kind of squint to see the differences. But
I did love that he's like, oh, okay, smart guy, end program. And then he realizes he has 2 fucking claws. And then Wolverine does the snicked with the other claws in front of his face.
Are we gonna see a child get injured in this show?
Hopefully. Oh, in the show. Got it. Sorry. So from that, it jumps over, and Cyclops and Jean are, having like a really awkward phone conversation. And we see the thing that has led to the biggest continuity argument on the internet right now about this show, where it is them standing in front of the portrait of the original 5 plus Xavier, and Angel is in the grouping. And we talked about this during the run of X-Men 92, because nobody seems to recognize Angel when he's going through all the shit with Apocalypse. But we did see flashbacks, like with the Amelia episode and stuff like that, of the X-Men in like original Danger Room segments. And that was Angel. That was not a mimic or somebody like that in there.
Yeah. So a little bit of fast forward to the next episode. Morph turns into the Blue Angel.
That's this episode.
Is it this episode?
Yeah.
I'm so tired and confused. Okay, so this episode.
Ron and I have had a rough 48. Right. Let's call it what it is.
But so it's like, man, there's so many things now. So it's not even like they could try to separate it or something. Like, this is the same guy.
Right. And they're all in the classic outfits. It is the original debut look from X-Men #1. So
I will chalk that up to like, if there has to be any quote unquote retcons to the original 92 show, it would like default to the books. Mm-hmm. It would be probably better, like concession than try to like force some weird story, whatever with the new character.
Right. It also would have looked really weird if you only did an original 4 as opposed to the original 5. And then perfectly to your point, if you put a different 5th, that would also be weird.
Yeah. And I like how Iceman was still like the fluffy with the boots.
The snowman version.
Yeah. Well, there was another version that was like a straight up snowman, right? Like a Frosty the Snowman, or is that just one of the transformations?
That was a transformation.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, but he's not ice. He could have been Snowman, literally. Because he was puffy. But they're talking to Dr. Cooper, who's on the treadmill.
Who is Valerie Cooper.
Is that okay?
That was who we had seen in the trailer up on the stage for the UN, who in the comics was the government liaison to mutant affairs. Obviously her role here is a little more like bigger because it's at a UN level and it's not just a national level. And Val was the liaison with X Factor to the American government. So
gotcha. And they're talking about needing to find Trask because of this whole Sentinel thing. Before we get into their conversation, my note here is like, she's like definitely Mystique, right?
That is the first time I've heard that.
There was just something weird about that whole conversation. And maybe it was just the acting or directing or whatever, but I feel like I've gotten enough like Mystique, surprises.
I think it might be biasing you a little bit.
Okay.
Because this feels like every version of Val Cooper that I've read before.
Okay. It's just, and it has mostly to do with the events of the next episode seem a little orchestrated, but we'll get into that next one.
They bring up Trask. You see like the bio headshot of Trask, and there is an X on the screen. Did you notice the X on the screen? It was like kind of filling like white space in one of the corners.
Kind of. I think my eyes have just like kind of filtered out all the X because they're everywhere. They're like baby blankets and stuff.
It is not just an X. It is the X that appears in the X Factor logo specifically.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the placement of Easter eggs in here is so thoughtful, and I think that's a part of what you and I missed a little bit in Evolution, where they were trying to not do that like we were looking for Easter eggs that didn't exist, and the Easter egg was the girl named fucking Ellen DeGeneres as opposed to anything related to the comics. But like it was like, oh, that's her file, and if she has the relationship with X after like that all of a sudden starts, all tying together. So,
and Dr. Cooper is giving them shit. You're like, well, what you saw was impossible because you guys destroyed the last, master mold. He's like, Mom, they might have built another one. Who ever thought about that?
Yeah, and he also like drops a like, oh well, maybe you could get off the treadmill and do your fucking job.
That's the Scott we know.
Yeah, that was my Scott. That's the one who's like, oh, we're liking you, and then you did that.
Yeah, but at least he did it to the right person.
Yeah,
because she was kind of like it is there. I think part of like the energy I got from maybe it's Mystique or whatever was just like how cocky this politician. I know politicians cocky and just kind of go hand in hand, but like she seems really like they want to project this pretentiousness because she's not even bothering to have a full conversation with them. Like, in a meeting, she's like working out in like an 80s spandex outfit, not even 90s.
Yeah, and then her response is like, Charles was a dear friend in real life. Why don't give me your trust? And then I didn't write down the exact quote from Scott, but it was essentially actions speak louder than words.
Oh yeah, it was something. Yeah, these are meaningless.
And then it was just kind of like click, like turn off the video screen. Also, really solid technology for a video call for night.
Right, it goes into like a hidden bookcase thing.
But that was definitely one of those things where it was like, oh, the screen is probably like 3 feet thick, so it's built into the wall. You see outside that the team is playing basketball, which is an X-Men tradition, and that's where we actually see Xavier's death certificate as 11/11/96. To your point, showcasing that this is definitively 97, and it is somewhere in that range of a few months later for it. And Jean's like, oh, that's why you're in a shit mood today.
And they make it unclear, because on the second watch, I noticed the X-Men at least never say he's dead. They just say he's gone.
Yeah.
So this is like an elaborate cover, because how do you explain that Professor Xavier almost died, but he got taken away by an alien race who you weren't aware of?
Yeah, it opens up a lot of issues. So they're living a lie together. And I'm curious because there were only a few scenes from the trailer from a few weeks ago that have not made it into the show yet. And one of those was a casket being lowered into a grave.
Oh yeah.
So the theories online are, is that supposed to be Charles's casket, meaning it was a representation of him being buried so the public believes the lie? Yeah. Or like was that a red herring and it's somebody else's fucking grave?
I also kind of wonder, does he actually just die at some point? Like, do they get word back from like Lalandra or whatever, like he didn't make it, like we tried or something, like
my only reason why I say I doubt that, and it's not something I would ever stake like a bet on kind of thing, is I don't think Morph would have turned into Xavier if Cyclops knew that he actually died.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, and also,
like Morph is callous, but I don't think Morph would do that if Charles was actually dead.
Yeah, we'll see. But they set up a lot of like mysteries. They did a good job. I'm kind of curious of how that's going to get wrapped up in 8 more episodes. It seems like there's like enough for 20, or maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why the second season got greenlit so early.
Yeah, they're like, we need more time, please.
Right. And they start, so they start talking about Xavier's not passing, even like being gone, and like what his wishes would be. And Jean starts talking about wanting to not have a crazy life with the baby. Cyclops is like, we can't leave. We were the first students. And to Jean's credit, I mean, the mansion has not been proven as a good place to raise a child.
The mansion isn't a safe spot for a teenager. I don't know what you could do with somebody who can't defend themselves yet.
Right. But then we don't get to hear the rest of that conversation because it gets interrupted by, you hear Jubilee yelling, and then the basketball just goes straight through the window and breaks that big portrait of the original team, and Cyclops goes out to see what's going on.
And Jubilee just blasted Logan, like just went for it. And he's like giving a cocky smile about it.
Yeah, I like they're developing their relationship further from, like, we saw them in 92.
Yeah.
And Jubilee like looked up to him. She still looks up to him, but she's a lot more comfortable like giving him shit now. Which
really falls into what we've talked about in the past of, in this version of the show, Jubilee took over that Kitty relationship, which had previously existed in the comics. And as Jubilee like developed over time, she also had a relationship with Logan. But like there was a lot of that like back and forth as Kitty toughened up too. So
yeah, that's nice. We find out through exposition speak from Jubilee that Wolverine's whole thing scared Sunspot off, which that tracks. He didn't,
as it should have.
Right. And so Scott decides, like, well, he can't just be running around with assassins after him, especially bigoted assassins. So he's like, Wolverine, you're gonna go, and Jubilee's gonna go with you. I love the dichotomy of it. It's like Wolverine's like fucking A, and then Jubilee's like yes, like another mission.
And then Scott is also like, oh yeah, you guys should go too. And Rogue's like, we didn't do anything. He goes, exactly.
He said you took the words right out of my mouth. I was
Yeah.
like, you are a well-spoken asshole, man.
But then like Wolverine says the most cutting line I think of any of these two episodes is like, yeah, what Gyrick did was messed up, but you know, the worst part of Professor X being gone is you.
Right.
It's like, damn, dude.
So that love triangle hasn't gotten any softer.
No, definitely not.
And another good point is Cyclops is not. It's also for the kids' safety, but they need him to find like the Sentinel thing. He's
right. They need to use him as a way to trace stuff back. And the alternate idea is like, well, if we can't find him, we got to go for the guy. And this is where he actually said the guy who killed Charles.
Yeah, but it is still vague enough. They were like, is that supposed to be like a wink, wink? You know,
right? Yeah, like I don't believe he's dead. I will say I do not believe Charles Xavier is dead. Mm-hmm. He's gone, but he's not. But I don't think he's dead.
My gut tells me that that's going to be like the finale cliffhanger,
right.
Seeing Charles, and then we have to wait probably 20 years to see the second season.
Well, because we also know he has been voice cast. And it's not by like a small actor, like it's a dude who's been on like The Walking Dead and stuff like that. So it's like
Red Skull, right?
He was the second Red Skull.
Yeah, he was the replacement for Hugh. What's his face?
Hugo Mortensen.
Hugo Weaving.
Yes,
Hugo Weaving.
Yeah. I was confusing Lord of the Rings names.
Oh yeah. So probably, but yeah, I don't know. Or this is also this kind of a red herring thing because they casted someone like pretty notable. It might be the flashbacks. We don't know like what the use case.
It's entirely possible they're going to be flashbacks. Yeah.
So they need to find Gyrick to find Trask, which once again I had to like remind myself who all these people were because like these like generic white dudes from the original season are just kind of hard to keep track of for me. They did a better job of distinguishing him this time because Gyrick has like the anime villain sunglasses going on. So
even while he's in prison,
right? Yeah, courtesy, like you have to stay on brand.
So they jump over to the bar, and it is the stereotypical like divey bar from the outside, but every window is like they must have hollowed out the inside of this building because every window has the flashing lights going on for this.
Yeah, it's cool. This whole scene was one of my favorites, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this, but it's a total vibe, and I know this like kind of cringy millennial speak, but it's the best way to describe this.
I wouldn't call it a vibe. I would say it nailed the raver vibe though.
Yeah, well, I just mean like I could watch that whole thing and it gives kind of a more EDM version of like Neo meeting Trinity for the first time in the Matrix or something, you know, like this whole like feeling. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the reason why I think it still fits rave versus EDM to me is like the fucking glow stick kids and stuff like that, which we find out Sunspot is one of them, where he has the necklace on and then he's holding the ones in his hands and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, I could smell the Molly from here.
I was gonna say I think the thing that's like missing for me for the rave vibe is the lack of drugs.
Which is
I don't do hard drugs, but I've been to a few raves in my lifetime, both in and out of the United States. Actually, no, take that back. They've all been out of the United States. One was in Scotland, one was in Toronto, and it was like 75% drugs and 25% music and vibe.
Right, but they did replace that with it having a bar. So They all walk in as a group. We've talked about this in the trailer reaction. Jubilee is just like let into this bar, and there's no way Jubilee is old enough to be in this bar that is openly serving booze.
She's like as old as like 17, right, or something?
Ish, yeah. So if she was 13 in 92, that means that she is at absolute most she's fucking 18.
You know, I'll bet part of the kind of, I don't know, backstory here is that this is one of those like unofficial, not that there's an official rave, but like kind of where they took like an art museum and turned it into a rave at night or something like that, right. You know, where if you can pay, you can get in, not too concerned about it. So
they all split up and Gambit and Rogue go up to the rafters. And I think this is the whole, like, this is TV PG. This is not, you know, Saturday morning, you know, whatever E for kids is shit. Like, it'd just be like G7, I guess, if it was Saturday morning. Because Gambit is straight up holding a mixed cocktail in his hand.
Yeah. We see booze in this and not like vague bottles.
No, it's like that is whiskey and Coke or whiskey. I can't tell which, but it's straight booze.
And also, they do a pan over from Rogue's point of view of the crowd and real close-ups of everybody touching.
Yeah, everybody's horny.
Yeah, this show, I saw Eric Voss talk about this from New Rock Stars. I agree with him. X-Men were kind of horny in 92, very horny in this one.
No.
Even though everybody's arguing about like Rogue's butt or whatever, it doesn't matter. Everything's like 10 times hornier this time around than 92.
No. Well, when it's your own distribution thing, standards and practices gets a little leaner.
Yeah, and also literally is not being broadcast to children on Saturday morning.
No kid is buying the X-Men 97 toys. That is literally the people our age who are buying those at Walmart right now.
And no kids can afford them. I talked to my brother about it, how much those cost. So my brother actually bought a couple of those for my niece, will be turning 10 soon. Mm-hmm. And just the toys. I think he said he's not quite comfortable like letting her watch the show just yet, or this one. But I was like, aren't those kind? Because I was like, oh, they're really small though. And he's like, no, the Legends. I was like, you bought her like the $35 action figures?
25 right now on the pin. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
the epic ones, which are the smaller ones, which is that was the set of 5 of them for like $45. Those are like the $8-9 each. But yeah, it's the main style size ones are $25 each.
I think they're more where he's at, because he said he got like 2 of them for, and it was like over $70.
You should be shipping those from Los Angeles to your brother.
I didn't know he was looking for them. I didn't know that I'm happy that she's into X-Men action figures. Now I know. And her birthday is coming up soon, so we'll get that. But yeah, but the point of that pan over everybody touching is that Rogue is to remind us, and she actually says this too, just in case you didn't know, was that she wishes she could like go down there and party with everybody without killing everyone within literal arm's reach.
Yeah, like if somebody just bumps into her. Yeah.
And then Gambit goes over, like on her gloved hand, like touches her, and he's like, it would be worth it. Rogue's just like, the deal. We can't do this or whatever. And then we catch up down on the actual floor. Morph and Wolverine. So I think it was interesting that Morph had the caution of going as their male human presenting self from the 92 show to this club, but then freely transforming into a pregnant woman in line of sight for everybody who is not looking directly just at Wolverine's face or way. Yeah. And also being like an anime version kind of, because when Morph like was talking about Jean's belly, it would like bulge.
It was getting bigger. Yeah. And starts getting into it with Wolverine of like, oh yeah, married to the most boring human on the planet and having a kid with them and gonna have this perfect life. And then that's when Wolverine kind of lets in that he knows what's going on. It's like, it's not perfect, that school's not safe for a kid, and he's like, they're leaving. And it kind of deflates more. And that is where Friends of Humanity enter in. Wolverine spots them and kind of gives a nod up to the scaffolding where Gambit and Rogue are. So
this is another like level of reality that this 97 has that 92 didn't necessarily, or Evolution had, was they quietly de-escalated that thing. There was no like big bar fight, or there wasn't a fight that no one noticed. Right.
They pulled him into a corner and fucked him up kind of thing.
Yeah. And then it cuts away to Jubilee finding Sunspot, what you said, with the glow sticks and everything. This part definitely was a vibe where Jubilee's like, all right, well, we'll dance, because Sunspot was like, okay, give me one dance and then I'll go with you. I don't think he was going to go, but he might have been flirting with Jubilee. We're not quite sure.
I definitely got flirting vibes with her.
And so she's like, sure. So she puts her shades down, and then I love this animation because it went from like really stuttery, purposely stuttery 90s animation to like she was the smoothest moving, and the fireworks were really cool. Once again, openly using fireworks powers in the middle. I guess everybody's on drugs. That's fine.
If you're on Molly, nobody noticed it. For clarity, I've never done Molly, but I hung out with people in high school and college who did, and I could have lit them on fire and they wouldn't have noticed it. So,
and I'm not saying that people on rave drugs would notice that. I was more saying that like Morph probably didn't have to bother transforming into human form walking into this place.
Yeah, they would have just been like, oh cool, what's the white head, Voldemort?
Yeah. Or like, you lost your nose too much.
That's a different kind of drug, Rod.
See, that's the kind of drug that I saw in Scotland during dubstep.
The kind where people's faces would fall off?
Well, it's just like, you take it through your nose. But
I love how we're being subtle about it, like anybody's gonna give a fuck.
Right. Or just fill in the blank with whatever you think it is. And their dance gets interrupted by Wolverine, who, I'm just going to put it out there, I don't want to vouch for you, is a Friends of Humanity hat, but it's like clearly like a MAGA thing. He puts the hat on Sunspot, and he's like, yeah, we took care of these guys for you, but if you still want to chance it, then, good luck. But that's what convinces Sunspot to go back with them. And then we cut over to the prison, I guess, that Gyric's at. We're not completely clear.
I think it's like a Rikers.
Something, yeah, indiscriminate. It's not a Juggernaut vat tank thing.
No, it's a human-held prison.
Yeah. And they're in like the
interrogation room. Yeah.
Two-way mirror. Bishop's on the other side of the two-way mirror. Scott and Storm are questioning Gyric. And Gyric, you might have more notes on the speech. The two things that like really like popped out, because this was a super dark, when I say well written, not that I agree with it, but was so heavy. And this actor who voiced this, perfect delivery, was describing. So Cyclops and Storm said that because of Gyric's actions, the public are more sympathetic to humans. And Gyric says something that's like not untrue, is that this is fashionable sympathy and it'll eventually go away. We've seen that. There's causes that come and go, especially now with the news cycle, the way it goes. And then he evolves his whole monologue into tolerance is extinction, which is like, I think that was the first time we're like, they're going to go into a real world, like replacement theory and like real world problems and stuff. Like there are people out there that literally think that other, like inclusion of other ethnicities and marginalized groups and stuff will replace people who are already around. So he just, and he's doing it and his glasses are getting like reflective of Scott and Storm. And it is, for being animated, it was super dark.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I had as a note that you didn't touch on, because you nailed all of it, was just he starts out cocky, which he's a little bit like showing off of like, yeah, that's cute that you guys finally have friends in high places. Must feel nice. But yeah, it's like, yeah, it's all performative is essentially what he's implying. Like people actually don't care about you, but they think they're supposed to, which, really mimics the conversations that we're still having today where, no, there are people that are supportive. And then there are absolutely people who are performative. It just really depends. Where do you fall that you, like, do you see through the people who are performative and they're full of shit? Or, are there people that are genuine that are being accused of being performative? And they're absolutely both. But he's taking the full-fledged pessimist view that a bigoted person would take of, you're only here because you're told you should be here and you're told you should care. And
I would even, not to defend him or anything, would even say like he's a little bit right in that there are probably a large percentage of people that do genuinely care and try, but life is just exhausting and there's too many like red alert things.
Yeah. Like I hate to say it, but like it irks people when they get an Amber Alert because they're like, what are the chances I'm ever going to see this instance that I'm like, but my phone is going off and like it literally gave me panic. It's like, well, yeah, it's because there's a fucking kid that's in danger. So yes, you should care. But at the same time, it's like, because of the news cycle, like you were mentioning earlier, we're hit with bad news and tragedy so much. It's not because there's more of it than what existed 3 decades ago. Now we just can't escape it because we're literally being pinged on our phone every time something bad happens.
My biggest complaint about the Amber Alerts, at least in LA, is that it sends you to Twitter or whatever it's called now. Even when I'm not at home, like you said, it kind of gives me a little anxiety. Like, oh shit, there's like something happened to a kid.
It's also the same alert noise that would go off if there was an emergency that is affecting more people too.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to discount ever a kid being at risk, but it's like if there was like, hey, there's a big fucking earthquake happening. That's the same noise our phones would make.
Yeah, but I
or the fucking flood warnings that we've seen in LA. Like that's what I've gotten is the flood warning shit.
Yeah, but I click on them because I'm like, maybe by chance if I'm out, shopping or something, I see this, then at least I'll have a face in mind or something. Mm-hmm. And it just the link sends you to Twitter. I'm like, why?
Right. Why
does it have to be this place? But yeah, anyway, Gyric he's pretty confident. His faith is in the like, what's the word? Like the fickleness of humanity, which that's almost worse than him having actual allies, in that he's just like, no, I just have enough faith that everybody's going to forget about this and I'll be fine eventually.
Or it's just kind of like true nature is going to come out.
And Scott, once again, like he's going to have a number of these great line. He's like, yeah, but have you met my wife? And then we see Jean in that classic like Cerebro overlay.
He's like, I'm different than Xavier. Because Charles would do everything in his power to make you see the light. Yeah. And he's like, well, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to fucking shoot me in the middle of a jail and get arrested for it? And that's where it's no, but my wife is going to get exactly what I want out of you.
Yeah. And there's something, I don't know, just startling, because I just have never thought to put this combination together of a pregnant Jean in Cerebro, like mentally attacking anyone, let alone Gyrick. And then she just full on goes like into psychedelic mind mode. I'm not sure completely what all we saw there. I feel like there's a dozen Easter eggs at least that we're going to call back to.
Yeah, they find out about a backup master mold. And then, like, there's a skeleton-faced master mold that's, like, gives the I am death speech, which I thought that was a reference to something, dude. I could not find...
I think that was a Ozymandias.
It was similar, but there was enough different amount from the phrasing that I didn't take it as a one-to-one.
I was paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And then there was, like, a not Sandman, or I don't think it's Sandman thing. We don't know who that was.
Right. And Rod and I have talked about this. We watch the show differently. Rod watches with captions on because otherwise he can't hear. I turned the captions on and it only said male voice. But yeah, it was no, not again. I'm so sorry. That's what the phrase is. And there's no clear indication of what that is up until now.
Yeah. And also another important point, Jean's not pregnant in this mind space or whatever, but there is still a baby. The baby is just in a cradle outside of her, so she goes like grab the everything is so, I mean, they did a good job.
And then there's a mass graveyard shot.
Yeah,
the mass graveyard shot to me reminds me of Genosha, and I don't know if that's how this season is going to end.
Yeah, and so she's already kind of discombobulated, but then like these red eyes, which I think maybe imply sinister, but they don't say outright like somebody's here and something's wrong.
They don't say it outright, but there's also like the shape of them feels a little bit like Master Mold, so I don't know if that's a red herring on it either.
What if Master Mold has like sentience, but not like mechanical sentience? Is like whatever this, the what do they call it in the TVA, the temporal something? It's basically like the soul in the MCU. When Loki gets scanned when he first gets to the TVA, they're like, we need to make sure you have like a temporal something, and it's basically to make sure that he's not like. See, this is what things like. So, there's some robots in the MCU, but they have souls, so it's like kind of that thing. I don't know.
I don't remember the phrase you're talking about, but keep going.
But basically, it's like, does Master Mold have like whatever their equivalent of like a soul is now, like something that Jean can invade their mind?
I think it's representing something in him else that he's connected to, as opposed to it being Master Mold. I think Master Mold, because even like Nimrod isn't
that's true,
like that level of it. Like I don't think Trask and Gyrick are smart enough to create sentience.
Oh, that's right, because
it's more programming than sentience to me.
There was a part of time they were like the odd couple in the Amazon, right? That's funny.
Yep. And
then she gets thrown out. I think the most startling, besides her being pregnant, was also I don't recollect in my experiences Jean seeing a future for. She's like telepathic, but like not like Miss Cleo.
Not precognitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, when there's like this big flash that goes off and it's like, it gives the impression of like, imagery you've seen evoking a nuclear bomb, where it's like the light shines through people to the point where it feels like it's ripping them up. And it's like, oh, it ripped apart Jean in the image of her holding her soon to be born kid.
Yeah. I was like, save the cheerleader, save the world.
Oh, yeah. I've blocked out so much of Heroes, but damn, that first season was pretty good.
I still had fun, even in the dumb seasons.
The carnival season.
It's not the best, but, then Jean wakes up. She assures Scott over the comms, what do they got, that she's okay, but they need to stop something, and he needs to get back.
They need to stop Trask.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then on the Blackbird, all the X-Men are heading to the Sahara Desert because they grasped through that crazy psychedelic thing that's where that was.
I mean, I trust Jean. She's a great psychic. I trust her.
Yeah. Also, this is the kind of story jump that the 92 series would do, so I feel it just kept the energy of that up.
Wasn't that also where Magneto's hub was that Rogue remembered was in the middle of the Sahara too in Evolution?
There just needs to be surveillance in the airspace since the Sahara from now on.
Rod, do we remember how big the Sahara Desert is? It's like 3.2 million square miles.
Yeah, they can figure something out.
You have way more faith in humanity than I do.
Yeah, so they're talking. Portions of the scene were in the trailer where Cyclops and Wolverine are kind of giving each other shit.
Well, it starts out with, we get more like lead up to it where Wolverine's like, we should just send him back to the UN in pieces. And Storm was like, oh yeah, maybe let's not. What was her phrasing? It was like, no mutilation today.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's not mutilation, it's just weight loss.
Right. And I was like, oh, are we going to see Wolverine finally cut someone?
Right. No.
In the animated show?
Yeah. And then that's where we get the scene from it feels more pointed now with some of the other stuff that's been said in the episode. Yeah, we're going to do this as a team. Do you think you could handle it? And Wolverine's like, okay, Dad. And then immediately the top of the Blackbird or X-Jet, whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah, they call it.
Yeah.
Or what if that was a Blackbird and from now on?
And now we get the X-Jet after. Mitt Rod, you might be right.
This sequence was fucking phenomenal.
This sequence was great. The Sentinel grabbing Scott as other people are like falling through the sky. He shoots the head off of it with like a slice motion and stuff like that. It was beautiful.
The choreography, like whatever the animation equivalent of camera work is, because they follow perspectives and stuff. Love the teamwork. We're seeing the evolution of the team here because there's no hesitation. They've planned for this. The Danger Room training worked out. Was it Cyclops was like Storm? Or no, Storm nods at Rogue?
Storm nods at Rogue, and she starts going to one side. Rogue goes to the other. Rogue like punches through something before she grabs Beast and Bishop. I love that she grabs Beast by like his underwear, essentially.
Yeah, because there's nothing else to grab onto.
Yeah.
So you're going to get a wedgie. This is going to be out.
Yeah. And then Morph transforms into the angel outfit of Archangel.
Yeah. And catches Wolverine. I love how they keep reinforcing these relationships. So like those two like are just kind of
the bromance connected. Between those two is perfect. It's literally perfect.
And then just another thing to love about Scott. So it prefaces a little bit the percussion in the music right here is as much as I love like all Ron's work in the original show. The Newton brothers really nailed it in this scene because Scott just gives that look of confidence, and then you hear this percussion that just kind of slowly amps you up,
right?
And then he fucking like optic blasts the ground to land. That was the most badass thing I think I've seen all week.
It gave me Captain America vibes, and I don't often say that about Scott.
I can see that, and I was like, man, I love this dude. Like, as I think our podcast name turned from like disdain for Scott to like we were just waiting on him to become whatever this is, like.
I mean, I've always liked Scott. Scott was, when I was growing up, my favorite X-Men from the comics, and then like as an adult took a cynical view of him from X-Men 92. But yeah, there's something about him that he has begun stepping into that role, and I think a part of the reason why Wolverine doesn't vibe with it, aside from the gene aspect, is I do think he's a little jealous that it's like, oh, he's not just the leader because he's in the squad and Xavier's saying he's the leader. It's like, no, he's actually your leader, and you have to deal with that.
He's a good leader. He's also just like a cool dude, and there's not any clunkiness to his fighting. I feel like in 92, as strong or whatever he was, everything was really like kind of sledgehammer and everything. Everything's like calculated. Although I guess this is Harris, there's probably not anybody out there, but if there was any life out there, they're just dead now. He blasted that guy because it was like a mile wide like splay of the thing. But the landing sequence, everybody's, oh my God.
Right.
Like,
and that's where we do get the moment from the trailer of To Me, My X-Men. And it's like, it hits, man. They could not. I look back at this episode, like having watched it twice in the last 2 days, and I don't know if there's a thing I would have changed.
Right.
Like, aside from like that, like the bestie thing it is what it is. But like, from a beat perspective, I don't think I would have changed a thing about this episode.
Oh yeah. And even moments like this, which are clearly would not have happened in the real world, and they could not have done without being campy in live action.
Yep.
Because they all strike a pose and look at a camera that shouldn't be there, down to the point where like Storm does the extra, like she's extra. She does like a wrist flick to who, but it looks cool.
When you say Allison was being extra, she'll zap the shit out of you.
That wasn't her. Whoever animated her, that's who did, because there was actually no dialogue during that. And someone I think like was like, oh, maybe it was like her passing off the cue to Cyclops. She does it after he says To Me, My X-Men.
Yeah.
He says it, and then she's like, I was like, what?
Yeah, there's a flourish there.
Yeah, it was great. And then
gets dark
quickly,
out.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess they quickly find Master Mold, but I guess we're supposed to feel like they've been walking for hours.
But we assume that Master Mold sent one Sentinel out there, it fucked them up, and Master Mold was not quick to send back up.
Sure, maybe not the smart as a baby Master Mold.
It's not the smartest Master Mold.
Trask is there on the scaffolding around Master Mold.
Yep.
And he looks like he's not surprised.
Well, I mean, Master Mold knows that the baby Sentinel got messed up doing it. So it's like, all right, you were on your way. Also, that means that Trask is literally living in a junkyard in the middle of a desert.
Which is worse than him being like besties with Gyrick in the rainforest. He's kind of living like that Star Wars life, I guess now, right?
Oh yeah, it's a Ben Kenobi vibe.
And then there's not even like they're not trying to be conservative about the amount of action scenes, because this is what, like a minute after the last one. They launched into this fight, which
not even a full minute.
Yeah, a lot of people probably saw this as a preview online, but
it's great.
This Sentinel fight is next level. Whatever team came together to choreograph this, it was. I feel like I speak for a lot of fans from the 90s and stuff, was what you would expect to be the same and elevated of all the X-Men stuff. Like there's so many little moments, and normally I don't take a lot of notes on fight scenes, and I didn't do too many here, but like
can I run through this and give you the points on it, because I was loving the choreo on this. Yeah.
Well, the first thing I was going to say is like they brought that X-Men theme for the fight scene, so someone paid attention to the score of the original show. That was like the very first thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the jacked up Sentinels start popping out of stuff and attacking. Rogue does a sit out clothesline. That is a very specific style of move, and it was thoughtful.
I knew you were going to say something about it, only because other friends who are fans of wrestling were like, she did and they called it whatever you just called it. And I was like, okay, so John's definitely going to know what this is.
Because if you do the same thing from behind, it's called a bulldog. But when you do it from the front, that's a sit-out clothesline.
That's so great. So, they probably had like so much reference footage of actual WWE stuff.
Yeah. And then the next thing we see is Wolverine just straight up decapitates one of the Sentinels.
Classic. Don't have to mess with it.
Nope. Perfect. Then Beast does the most impressive thing from a physical standpoint I've seen Beast do. He literally trips a Sentinel by pulling its leg out from under it. We've talked about like, what is the strength of Beast? This is actually our first reveal into how strong he is. Because even, I don't care how much leverage you use, you have to be fucking strong to be able to pull that off.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say his biggest physical feat was making a pun.
Well, he goes in, he jumps into its chest, and then he literally does a quote from Casablanca. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, is the Casablanca quote. Yeah. But he adds something along the lines of
involuntary.
Yeah, involuntary friendship.
So right before he jumps, he's like, I hope you have a change of heart, and then he jumps in.
I chose to not write that down.
Right. Now, so this probably, before the next thing that happens, is my favorite thing, where he fucking mech suits the Sentinel.
Yeah.
I want that toy. That looks amazing. Like, not like a pristine Legends or whatever collectible thing. I want like 90s Toy Biz janky. Like put the
you literally can't even do that with the 90s Toy Biz toys, because they don't have the articulation to make his arms go in the directions that would go.
They don't, but maybe it's a little bit of a reference to that, or even if it's just like accidentally a reference, because I remember the original Sentinel toy did have a space for the action figure to go inside its chest.
Because that was supposed to be like a prison type thing.
Yeah. So, that's interesting. Okay, so another reason.
Am I adding this to the do I have to ask somebody list? Was that a reference to a toy?
I mean, it probably wasn't, but I just made that connection because I just remembered like, I wish the original did that. It did do that. I mean, you couldn't see him.
So then we get a great moment from a character perspective that is actually very subtle if you weren't really paying attention to it. Gambit is about to get hit, and Bishop moves in front and takes the hit for him. And you got to remember, the introduction of Bishop was coming back to the present to kill Gambit because he thought he was the traitor.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah. So they all trust each other now.
Yeah, and then we see obviously he absorbs that.
Yeah, and then is another the 20th reason to love Scott in this episode. He does to me it was almost just as big as Cap saying Avengers Assemble, and I didn't even know I wanted this phrase. He's just like, give him the forecast, and it's going to be Storm because we haven't seen her yet,
of course,
in this fight, and he says forecast or whatever. But then when the Sentinels say Omega level threat approaching, that was a sexual moment for me. They say that, and it's just like a confirmation that that's where they're taking this Storm in this run, and then this piano music that plays underneath Storm's entrance is so badass. Like, it's just ominous, and she's walking on the sand like she's walking on water. Like, it's just
the lightning is hitting and it's changing the sand into glass because she's hitting it with that much electric power.
Yeah, that was my note here. Was so she's walking and turning the sand into glass and then shattering it and then creating a tornado. So there's like glass.
It's a glass tornado
that shreds the Sentinels in like one fell swoop. Granted, that might have been useful at the beginning of the fight, but like they wouldn't have had as much fun. This was the Storm that should have been in the movies and the everything. Like, is so, worshipped as a god. And I don't know, hearing the Omega level threat was just like, I rewound that just to hit it again. Like,
a little bit of info around Omega. Omega was used for the first time in Uncanny X-Men number 208 in 1986. It was not again mentioned until 2001.
Oh, wow. So they went like 2 decades without.
Yeah, basically
really?
15 years without going back to that. But I think, to your point, hearing it was just the power of what this phrase means.
Yeah, and especially coming from a Sentinel means it was objective and not like someone just feeling like she's strong.
Yeah,
like
there's
that.
not emotion behind it.
Yeah, they just did the scanner like, oh, she's a problem.
Yep.
And yeah, it was so satisfying. Like, I thought the opening sequence was going to be like the showcase for like, okay, she's pretty badass.
Yeah.
Like, this was it. More credit to Allison, the whole performance. If anything, I want them to use this as like a storyboard for whatever Storm in the MCU live action is going to be. Because you can't punch down from here. It has to elevate from this.
Yeah,
everything else will be disappointing.
If you can't do this, don't do Storm in live action again.
Right. I would rather not see her than have another Halle Berry.
Yeah. Give me the fucking New Mutants and don't include this group, because I don't want you to fuck it up, because I've seen it be perfect now twice.
Yeah, and it's funny because we saw 3 frames of this in the trailer, and it wasn't apparent that she was turning the sand into glass in the trailer. And it
just looked like she was stepping on, like, at that point, I thought it was just like a metal, like, plate or something like that. Like, I didn't realize that was her making her own pathway.
Yeah, and it's animated kind of like anime, where like the motion lines were blurring. I don't know, everything else. That's one of those scenes. It's kind of a song off an album for me. I'll just go back and watch that section.
Yeah.
Like, over. It's so good. But it doesn't end there, because then we get that iconic shot that everyone was talking about from the trailer with Gambit and Wolverine.
Right. Master Mold starts to get up, and then we see Gambit hops onto Wolverine, does the claw charge, and then the parts that we didn't see in the trailer, he uses his bow to launch Wolverine, because in this version we don't have a fastball special because Colossus is not a regular part of the team. Yeah. And then he's like, Morph, help me out. Morph turns into Blob. It is essentially a fucking trampoline for him.
It's awesome. And a little bonus, Gambit charges
the bow staff,
and then throws it to like help Wolverine out. I
want to know, there's got to be a term that the team has come up with for this, because it is they're staking their claim for a fastball special with this combination.
Right. Oh yeah, that should be on the list of questions. What is this move? Because so this is another thing I geeked out with my brother about when Wolverine finally went up to go slash the Sentinel. That was the move from the video game with the electricity splaying across the entire screen in his claws.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if it wasn't a purposeful, it had to have been somewhat. Like, I don't know, because whenever we see Wolverine in things where other people are using their powers, like projectiles and stuff, since he doesn't have like a Hadouken or whatever, they always give him like this electric that goes across the screen. So we finally like saw it in like a in-canon thing. And I love how, you're saying they have to have a name for it, because Wolverine didn't flinch.
Like, that was practiced.
Yeah. Like, they've run this multiple times.
Yeah.
Little note, I've seen other people, no shade, but I've seen other people say like, oh, you knew it was a big deal when Master Mold stood up. I was like, he stood up in 92. Granted, he was tethered with a plug.
Yeah, he was plugged in, but yeah.
Yeah, he got tripped up. Maybe he's wireless now. We didn't get enough chance to find out, because that whole, whatever they call that, fastball special 2.0 or something, took him immediately out. Like, he got beheaded, and then I feel like how he landed when he got beheaded has to be some reference to a shot, because it looked kind of artistic, he like leaned.
See it as a direct reference. If somebody can spot it and they let us know, please do. But that was also like, it got me when I was watching through the second time, the re-reference to the eyes, because you see eyes power up and then power back down, and they were in that very specific sentinel eye triangle shape. So
maybe after this, Trask will be like, maybe we should put a force field or something around the machine that makes the other machines.
Maybe we should do anything other than just be in the middle of the fucking open air desert.
Yeah, like they needed Magneto's dome for Master Mold.
Like, why would you not have other defenses? Like, you don't need a full Sentinel to have guns.
And then, like, immediately, Dr. Cooper and the military show up. They must have just been tailing them.
It's so funny, because we've talked about this too. The way that we call people's character name all depends on when you were introduced to them.
Oh, so you say Val?
I say Val and you say Dr. Cooper. I think that's just I think it's funny. Nothing bad, no shade whatsoever. It's just like I'll probably never call her Dr. Cooper. So
okay, gotcha. Yeah. And so they're dragging away Trask. Trask says something which gives like kind of like all lives matter energy, where he says like, you have no idea how it feels to be left behind by the future.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so in your head, you're coming from a very hurtful and scared place, but in reality, that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
And I like how they animate Cyclops' one eye through the visor. You can see it kind of like,
yeah, I like how they've played with his eyes through his visor on this one.
I think this is another drop in the bucket of why I thought maybe this is Mystique, because like she was just, I don't know, I guess she's used to all this stuff, but she was like, all right, we're going to send Master Mold to be disassembled, and this is standard. This happens every Thursday.
Yeah, and maybe it's just the preconceived bias on it, but I don't get that, because she's very like clinical with how she deals with shit. Like she's not putting emotion into it, because she's like, she's a G-man basically.
Yeah.
Oh,
although I like that foreshadowing for next episode. We do see what rattles her cage.
Right. Yes, but the part that was, she's like, well, you did it. You were right, and good job. And he's like, well, it wasn't me, it was the team. And it was like, because Scott has just been dealing with this, like, am I the right one to lead this? Can I keep this going? Can I do XYZ? And it's like, yeah, you can, dude. Like this, you still have to lead your team, but you're the one who could do it. So
I don't think in either 92 or Evolution we've ever seen such a coordinated X-Men before. Like, this is by far the best they've ever been as a team.
Yeah, with especially that many of them all going at once.
That's true. There's so many. So more, to the animators and whoever. I don't know if it's choreography is the right word for animation and direction and stuff. That's a lot of balls to juggle.
I would call it fight choreo.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, everyone was accounted for. Everything made sense. There wasn't like a weird like, what is happening there?
And I would say I think there's a part of it is animation as a whole has just improved over time, and like, you cannot have bad fight animation now when you have comparison to like all the modern amazing fights that have happened in anime. Like we've talked about Cyberpunk Edge Runners, like the fights in that are phenomenal, rival and beat any live action movie you can see in a lot of cases. So it's like, if you half-ass it and it's just like, oh, punch kick, it's like, it doesn't work anymore, Yeah,
well, this was phenomenal. But then it cuts back over to the mansion at the tower. Is that what it is? Like the spire thingy? Not spire.
Gable?
I don't know.
The dome at the top that has the pillars.
I loved this. This had to have been on purpose, that it reflected the time where Storm had to kind of help Jubilee get through her introduction.
Absolutely the same vibe I got from it.
Yeah, so Jubilee is able to kind of like, the torch kind of got passed down to her. She's kind of giving Sunspot the same, or her paraphrase speech that Storm gave her.
The we're all freaks spade.
A little less blunt.
Yeah, we're all weirdos.
That would have been great if she was like,
if she said that line, I would have lost my shit. I would have gotten looks from people on the plane from laughing.
Right. But then Sunspot is very much giving the energy of, he's still in the closet, because he shows his arm in the,
he's solar.
Yeah. Like look, but he doesn't even bring himself go all the way with it or further than his arm. And I think he says something to the effect of like, he doesn't even want to do it when he's alone, because he doesn't want himself to believe that this is real.
Yeah, he kind of lets her know that, he doesn't, he like, his parents don't know, and he doesn't want to like do it, because every time he does, he feels like he's lying to his parents.
Yeah.
And it like, to your point, yeah, it definitely felt like the like in the closet conversation vibe.
And so I love, and we'll see this more next episode, anything that was vague in 92 that people would argue about may or may not be representative before it is spelled out, like, clearly. They're not pulling any punches about it.
I think also a part of it helps, like, we do know, like, there are some openly queer members of that writing room, and not to say that the writer's room of this show in particular wouldn't have accepted it, but like in Hollywood in the 90s, like, it was still a behind closed doors thing really until the Ellen stuff happened. Like, like, there were certain people that had mannerisms that you might suspect, but like, it wasn't talked about back then. But then he kind of wraps it up of like, here's my number, pulls out the business card, which has the like classic 97 graphic design of like random neon and teals and stuff like that. And she's like, what do you do? And aside from being like rich and good looking. He's like, I'm also single.
Oh yeah, no, I remember what she said. She was like, "What's your job? Being hot and rich."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Also single." It's like, okay, so that was flirting from the club.
And there's like a quick callback to earlier in the conversation where she's like, yeah, it's great here, even if Scott won't let me fly the jet, which now is blown up. So don't worry, you don't have to fly that. But also he's like, maybe you could fly my family jet. And it's like, yeah, he's trying to get with her.
Have a joyride, like, I guess not 2.0, but this continuity's joyride or whatever. Yeah, but then we go back down to the basketball court. Scott's cool now because he's playing basketball with the X-Men instead of yelling at them for not doing other things, I guess.
But Jean yells at everybody, no powers. Like she's like, I'm going to referee, but I also don't want you to blow up me and my baby.
That seems like fair rules for sports that weren't created in the context of superhumans.
What sport do you want to see that was created in the context of superhumans, aside from a death match?
No, that's what I mean, though, is like basketball and volleyball did not have people with like optic blast vision and claws and stuff like in mind, so like they'd just be like a base level.
It would like you could just use steroids. Just imagine the record books, there's just like an M next to all the record holders because they were mutants.
Be funny. And so Scott, he's got his cool backwards baseball cap on. That's why he's the cool dad.
Yep.
And he actually, I didn't even think about that. That's literal now. And so he starts going into the speech of how him and Jean are leaving. We don't know if that's what they're going to say, but it sounds like that's what they're getting into.
And then Wolverine just throws it out there of like, oh, so you're bailing on us, which doesn't help. And then Jubilee is like, well, they were the first ones that were here, so who's going to lead the team? And then we luckily get the cutoff that is the alarm going off of like, oh, they're in Xavier's office. What could this be?
Right.
That's the only part that was the negative of the trailer, is this was obviously going to be the end of the episode, of this first episode.
But again, they needed a hook for us to all like have to watch the first day if we didn't have a reason already.
Yeah, they gave it to us.
And so I mentioned to my friend T, if you're listening, my favorite visual part of this episode, besides the fight scenes, where they bust into Xavier's office and they all pose like they were in the desert. And my favorite pose is Jean snapping into the baby bump pose. Like everyone else is superhero poses. And then she does like the Anguitas baby pose, like she's trying to show off. And it was the motion. If it was still, it would have been one thing, but like your eyes catch the motion for just like purposely like
right. But the funny part is, and like I've noticed this because of our friend Michelle Waffle, who does cosplay Jean, the pose that she makes that is showing off the baby bump is very similar to some of the ways where she does pose when she's not pregnant at all.
Oh, gotcha.
It's just coincidentally like that's the psychic I'm ready to fight pose. It just looks really good with a baby bump pose. So
yeah, it was just funny because she grabs the belly, and then also like little cartoon things that like wouldn't read as well in live action. Like Storm has lightning coming out of her hands, which the shot cuts off before you see the ceiling. You don't know where that goes.
Don't worry about it.
But it looks cool. Like everything looks cool.
That's totally a don't worry about it.
Yeah, and they're all just hovering.
Yeah.
So it's another one of those like the animation just cycles through like a loop, except for whoever's talking.
Magneto's there, and Magneto, way that we haven't seen him, at least in 92, where he's in like this all black trench coat. It kind of has like a little bit of like a mafia vibe to it in a way.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I thought Castlevania kind of, it was like, especially like the most recent like animated series is like that anime adjacent
ish. I wouldn't see it because that never was modern day, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
And he, gives the reveal that we all heard before, that Charles left everything, the legacy he built, the money. I'm glad they brought up the money. This is the first time they ever brought up the money in the show. Well,
he also, and I don't remember if this part was in the trailer that we had seen previously, he calls him that old fool. Like he actually has there's a slight bit of frustration in Magneto's voice that I didn't get from the trailer, where it was just like, I'm happy this is mine.
Yeah.
Like it was a little more like, shit, I actually need to like respect his dream.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have believed that completely, except for how like much they established their relationship before. And also, and this will touch on more in the next episode, but Magneto seeing how much Xavier sacrificed kind of proved him right, or proved Xavier right. That like being peaceful about it, even though he became a martyr, showed more of an example than Force did, at least at this moment.
Yeah, the fact that people have started having empathy for mutants, like that didn't exist when Magneto was trying to steal nuclear weapons from the US government.
Yeah. And then he tosses the will over to Scott, which is a novel, which I guess tracks because they're probably very detailed. They're probably going through every single financial whatever.
And also he's rich.
Yeah.
So it's probably handwritten by somebody in like calligraphy.
Right. It's in every language, just in case.
Yeah. It's written in English, Spanish, Irish, German, Polish, Russian, and then Shi'ar just for the fuck of it.
The Shi'ar is what I want to see. Or wait, would it be funny? Well, this wouldn't be work because they didn't have it at the time, but that'd be the thing that Julia Ewald would have authored is Xavier's Will and Testament.
I'm not going to ask Julia about that one.
But it'd be funny because that would make sense of being a book because Xavier's such like a rich asshole that he's like, this is not like a legal document in traditional
It's literally just a book.
It's like him dictating in story form his will. He's like, I started as a young boy in 19... But yeah, that's how the story ends, that cliffhanger.
Well, because he also ends with my X-Men.
Oh, yes. Oh, well, to me, my X-Men.
Nope, not to me.
No, he does. He says, it all belongs to me. It's a play on phrase. He's
sorry. Yeah. It's not the phrase by itself, to me, my X-Men, but yeah, it all belongs to me, comma, my X-Men.
X-Men, he like, it's a play on word, and I know that's definitely like a play on for the writers, but I feel like Magneto's such a like intellectual asshole. He also had been planning that for weeks to phrase like that. He's like, I want there to be an audible comma to have it. So it starts with Scott, claiming stake to the X-Men, then ends with Magneto. I mean, all of this is like not super surprising, but it's just cool to see. And then the last big surprise we have is they recreated the 3D outro to the show. Only, I did talk about this with my brother. It would have been a little bit cooler if they did the cheesy CG, but still very much appreciated that they went ahead and like did the thing with the stats and the cards, and also it's the same frustrating detail where they wouldn't necessarily get through all the characters every episode.
But we didn't have the laughing Saban kids at the end.
Yeah, that's the most important part.
Yeah.
Because they all died in the last time the mansion got blown up.
God damn it, Rod.
That's why Jean reminds him it's a school.
So the only other things that we didn't hit upon that I was able to find when I was doing like all my digging and research on this is Cyclops has actually, in the comics, retired twice from the X-Men. The first one happened in Uncanny 138, and it was right after the Dark Phoenix saga because there was a bigger break before we found out Jean wasn't dead. And it also happened in X-Men 200, which is also where Magneto became the leader of the X-Men in the comics. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then there is a story in the 2010s from the Avengers versus X-Men storyline that is called The Last Will and Testament of Charles Xavier.
Oh, there you go. See, that's not a complete departure for there to be a book, a literal book. Well, we're going to wrap up now since this is multiple episodes length. And this is funny that this week you will have gotten like literally like a month's worth of episodes in 1 week. But also, if you're listening to this and we were on time posting, both pray for me and congratulate me.
Please congratulate him.
Because it normally takes me a week to go through our normal length of episodes. This is more than twice as long. So we're going to see how this works. Still super excited about the show. Super strong start. I waited up till midnight. I made a bowl of cereal and I sat up and watched, and I like full-fledged corny, like just imagined I was 11 again on Saturday morning and watch this. So super excited. We're going to get on to the next episode, which you will hopefully hear soonish. We're just going to see how things go.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or official Instagram post about this episode. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating of the podcast on the podcast app if you're choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, and CastBox.
And Rod said podcast, but because we've been recording for 2 hours, I wasn't going to correct him.
That was my Boston accent.